In 2018, as the project I was working on was winding down, I knew that the next move I made was going to be a move for myself. I was going to start a business.
What are some key, guidelines you would offer to someone else?
Be focused. If you're trying to build one business, don't try to build two at the same time. You can't deploy every software, every strategy. You're just going to just burn yourself out.
Hey everybody, this is Ben with Magic Plan. Today I'm joined with my co-host Jackson Cole, and we have an exciting guest for everybody today. We have Phil DePaul, CEO of Boom Zeal Enterprises and owner of United Water Restoration of Long Island. How you doing, Phil?
I'm doing good. Ben, Jackson, thanks for having me today.
Yeah, it's a
Absolutely.
pleasure.
So let's get started. Phil, tell us a little bit more about yourself and what do you do?
For sure. Well, as you can see me, I'm rocking my United Water Restoration polo today. Proud owner of United Water Restoration of Long Island. And I got into the restoration business just over 5 years ago. I really didn't know much about it. I just had a background in disaster recovery, but it was kind of by accident. It's more program management, project management based. Before that, I was in wholesale distribution in the trades. I have a father who's been a plumber for over 40 years. So I was an entrepreneur without a business, is one of the things I like to say. And I jumped right into the United franchise and I haven't looked back. And now I consider myself a serial entrepreneur that exists in and around the home services and home improvement industry in Long Island, New York. And just chasing butterflies like a lot of us out there, trying to make good things happen.
Can you actually dive a little bit more into what you kind of started to lead into? You mentioned you weren't initially in the restoration industry. Can you kind of break down more so how you got involved with that from the start? I know you said you mentioned some other prior jobs, but like what really brought you into that afterwards? What kind of made you change your mind or helped you make the decision to hop into it?
Yeah, for sure. So in 2018, as the project I was working on was winding down, I knew that the next move I made was going to be a move for myself. I was going to start a business. I just didn't know what it was going to be. So I started working with a franchise consultant and kind of looking at a menu of options. And I was open minded. I've always been fitness driven. So I was intrigued by gym concepts, fitness concepts. But I ultimately shied away from that because I didn't like the retail trend nature of it. And having grown up in and around the trades, they've always just kind of made sense to me that I like to quote this, everyone's got a shit shower and shave. And it stuck with me because if you go for sexy, what's sexy today might not be sexy tomorrow. And for my work, I think you can make anything sexy. In fact, if we get into the One Tom Plumber brand that I've jumped into as well, we could talk about the pink, the branding, and having a lot of fun with getting behind messaging to make the trades fun. But in particular, United stood out to me. Number one, they were the only franchise in the restoration space that was available in my market. And when I got to know the people and their story, they were early on in their process. And I wanted to align myself with a company that had to offer the right essence, but maybe they didn't have the secret sauce, worked out to a fine degree. And I had spent the prior 4 years working in disaster recovery after Hurricane Sandy and working with local general contractors, their subcontractors, architects, designers, building departments, and municipalities. I got this organic acclimation to the market here. And it was a great segue that it was unintentional until I, like I said, started shopping for business models. And ultimately, I just picked, I said, you know what? There's no such thing as perfect, but I got to start making progress. So I dove right in and I was not a restorer. I had never been on a restoration project before, typical if you want to think of a water loss or something of that nature. It was not a situation I'd been in before, but I guess as maybe we'll uncover over the series of our conversation today, I am someone who tends to, jump before I think. And that's what I did in the restoration business. And I haven't looked back. So
I said, oh, that's quite the rabbit hole to jump into. Props to you on that. Sounds like you picked it up pretty quick. Do you think?
yeah, I mean, I'm a student, so one of my things that I love to do is I love to learn. And what's great about the restoration industry is that there's no shortage of knowledge and a knowledge base for you to dive into. And then it's the application of that knowledge in the field. So I did wind up working my way from being in the field. And trust me, I was a helper. I was not the lead technician. I got my,
Right, right.
I literally worked from the bottom up. Hot attics in the summer in Long Beach. For anybody who knows Long Island, it's a nice place to be when you're in the sand, not when you're in a 3-story confined space up at the top of the building in August. So I earned some of my stripes, and I just tried to work my way through learning the business sort of from the ground up.
Interesting. And so I'm curious, your time earning your stripes there, right? You talk about this, and we mentioned that you're CEO of Boomzeal Enterprises. So I'm really interested, as somebody that had to learn on the fly, right? You had to start somewhere. When you were building out your team for Boomzeal Enterprises, right? And building out your team for the different entrepreneurship ideas that you have, what's really important for you in terms of your team? Like how do you approach the individuals that you work with and what you're bringing what they're bringing to the table for you and your organization?
Yeah. So, it's easy to look in hindsight and say what's applicable today. But on day zero, what I like to say is if you had 2 hands and any idea what to do, you were right for me. And that's been true in every industry that I've jumped into subsequently. But in the restoration industry, I knew that in order to make it to year one, I had to get through year one. So what my expectations were, what my requirements were for someone to be on my team on day one, they were not as stringent or as high as they were by year 2 or at this point, year 5. So that is a natural process that I think we go through where you recognize, all right, I can't be overly picky about giving people a shot. So I am someone who tends to trust first and try to validate or verify. So you try to look for the essence in people. So, I say that the bar was real low. It wasn't as low as I'm making it sound, but the truth is, I needed my first technician. I had to get somebody. So here's a funny little story: is I didn't launch my franchise new. So the franchisor had launched a satellite location in Long Island, New York. So it technically was an acquisition of an existing brick and mortar. And I thought that I was getting an office admin and a marketer, but more importantly, I thought I was getting an operations manager and a technician. About a month before the paperwork was signed, the technician dropped off and they only had the operations manager. The Friday before I officially took over, the operations manager resigned. And I go looking around and I go, uh-oh, I'm the guy. Now I'm the subject matter expert. So in the truest sense of fake it till you make it, that's what I had to do. So if we think about the benefits of being part of a franchise, I knew that even though I was physically alone, I wasn't alone because a phone call away, I had my resources, and I did have some kind of umbilical cord to the mothership where it's like, all right, I think that based on the book that I read and the course that I took, I think this is what I should do. So, there was a degree of portraying confidence in oneself before I had built up the true competence. I was lucky enough to find a technician, I'd say, I think at the end of that first week, and he started on Monday, and he was a godsend for my first year. He checked a lot of boxes in terms of who I wanted to be around. He had a good skill set, and in the restoration industry, you can't turn it off, right? So somebody who doesn't check out Friday at 5 or any day at 5, really, for that matter, was really important. So what's a must? Someone who at least has an all-in mindset, because there is no off switch. And I'll tell you, for the first 2.5 years, I answered 99% of the phone calls that came into the business. I owned them for 24 hours a day. So it's not for the faint of heart. And I viewed it as the biggest opportunity to start seizing opportunities. And you don't know what you don't know. I used to respond to everything. I used to show up and inspect, any suspected speck of mold or drop of water, because you just got to see what it is and what it isn't. And anybody who knows the cost of acquiring a restoration lead, whether it's a relational lead, a digital lead, they all cost something.
Yep.
So from who answers the phone, sending the right message. So I was the brand ambassador over the phone. So before I delegated that, I viewed that as a baby, an important baby that you gotta, you rock the baby, take care of the baby. Someone's always got to answer the phone. Someone's got to show up when they say they're gonna. Oh, we'll be there in an hour. We'll be there in 59 minutes. Whatever the catchphrase is that that our value prop is in the emergency services business. And then at the very end of the day, even if the process isn't perfect, it's assure the client that you're going to do right by them and provide a solution. And I wanted people who at least intended to do the right thing. So when I hired an operations manager and I learned, I went from writing very bad Xactimate estimates and invoices, to writing somewhat bad to writing decent. And I did that through being around somebody who'd been in the industry for a while. So I think that the more that you could learn from others, make sure that the other people that you bring in have something to offer you. Like I said, I am a student. So I was like, well, can I learn enough from you to help me graduate from the 1 week mark to the 6 month mark to the 1 year mark? Like, there are so many stats about the survival of business. And, I have a survivor mindset in that we'll figure it out one way or the other. So my standard was definitely surround myself with people who had a clue as to what was going on. But then I also say, what got you here won't get you there. So, that's an important thing to recognize in terms of the growth of a business. You set your standard at a certain point, and that goes for people, that goes for your product and your quality. And then over time, make sure that you raise it, because otherwise you're static, you're stagnant. And another phrase I live by is grow or die. So the number one thing I did was I surrounded myself with people who could help me grow. And the second that you being an accelerant towards growth starts to become noise or interference because maybe an individual hasn't grown or evolved to the same degree, well, then you got to start making, hard decisions as a leader or an executive. But
right. So it feels very much like it was like trial by fire. And I mean, the recurring theme that we hear all the time speaking with these professionals is that there's nothing more important than just experience, like getting out there. You can read as many books as you want, but until you're actually in that attic sweating in the middle of summer, right? There's something to say for that, right?
Yeah. And I'm sure it's true of a lot of industries, but I'll tell you what, in the restoration business, I felt that the education that I gained in that first year or two, so valuable foundationally for me to help build it to what we are today, which is an operation that doesn't rely on me. I'm no longer the limiting factor on how much we could grow. So we have a general manager in charge of that business, and our team has grown, and our clients now, instead of me being the product that they were buying, it's our people, all of our people combined to make up the product. And that's the idea of building a business based on systems and processes. You want to have the McDonald's cheeseburger of, insert the business that you're in. At least people know what you're going to get, what they're going to get, and do it over and over again to produce, predictable outcomes. And I'm proud that we've gotten to that point. And it definitely comes with, like I said, raising the bar, having a certain criteria, but make sure that criteria, same is true for your clients, by the way. So you start and you're like, I'll serve anybody. And then before long, you're like, you know what? Just because I can serve everybody in theory doesn't mean I should. My thing is not made for everyone. Our business is not made for everyone to work in. So, those are some of the realisms that I kind of keep myself in check with.
Yeah, I think it really, excuse me, leans into the idea. It's something that we often encounter is you don't know what you don't know. And I think that's a very blatantly obvious phrase, and I think it goes a long ways though in these industries where, like you're saying, you can't beat hands-on experience. Is there something early on that would have helped you that if you wish you had known, given some of these, hands-on experiences, being the owner and someone out in the field that you wish you had known earlier in the process, or something you'd like to share for people even just starting out? Even if it's similar, same boat, where they're new to the industry, and obviously making mistakes is important. But what are some key, I guess, guidelines you would offer to someone else who started out in the same position?
Yeah, I think your ability to embrace being resourceful and restoration, there are a lot of ways to skin the cat in terms of mitigation, remediation activity. I see some people, some brands that are shell companies that everything is outsourced, subbed out. There's a chop shop of how the work gets done. And, in those businesses, they're built on marketing and sales. And then the production is a commodity that is not special. I'm always leery of the over promise, under deliver. I want my name to be behind everything that we do. That is the brand. That is it's the experience that we create. So what would have helped me is I definitely tell everybody, like we were just talking about, sit in the seat, like sit as low down, on the org chart as possible. So you have a healthy respect for the positions and what it takes to do what needs to get done. Because I always tell everybody, if I'm the chief executive, I'm the big shot, I'm the king or the queen of the kingdom. Well, there is no kingdom if there's no foundation. So even though maybe it's a lesson that I was aware of, you still got to like learn it and feel it and sit in it, in that if there's no one to extract the water, then you could be the best chief. But there's got to be the Indians. Like, so the production team, operations, whatever you want to call it, if no one answers the phone, the technicians don't have anything to do. Right.
Mhm.
So all of those things, having such a healthy respect for the details, and then over time separating yourself if you want to grow an intentional business. But when I think about things I would have known, right, is that there, number one, knowing that if you learn and you ask questions and you build a community. For instance, just because I enter the restoration market, I have competitors. But do you perceive them as competitors, or do you perceive them as, hey, we are serving the same market in the same area, maybe we can find some ways to collaborate? And if you have an open mind, not everybody will reciprocate that open mind, but try to break down those walls rather than build them. Because by building community, and franchise is one great way to do that, right? Because I have a lot of folks in the United network that I rely on, I collaborate on, and they're in the same industry. They fly the same flag. We don't compete with each other because we're in different, parts of the country. However, there are now, in the 5 years I've been in this business, there's a lot more technology and resources that are at your fingertips too. That, number one, you can't use everything. So be careful of the buffet methodology. You can't deploy every software, every strategy. You're just going to just burn yourself out with tech overload. But find ways to cheat. And I also think that cheating starts with long division. And I like to call it long division because long division is very frustrating. However, after you do the exercise and then someone gives you a calculator, you're like, oh, division is easy. But you're like, but I respect that, there's a way, as producing the outcome, and you can't shortcut everything, but the things you can shortcut, for instance, you guys know anything that you can do to accelerate the timeline of whether it's a sketching software or a process driven thing that, and we live in the day of AI, right? So people used to have jobs working at toll booths, and then there was like Easy Pass, and people used to, do this, and they're being replaced with that, right? Whether it's outsourcing the estimate writing process, it's using technology like in our business, we use Matterport. We work with a company called Clean Claims that has some really good documentation software. And again, you guys are no stranger to it. You have some good stuff too, which is that deploying a strategy for getting the work done in support of what I like to say, creating the 5-star client experience. There are a lot of ways, and you have to be curious and ask good questions and try new things. I am guilty of trying too many things at the same time. As I say, chasing many butterflies. So the same thing is, my last bit is, be focused. Because if you're trying to build one business, don't try to build two at the same time. If you're trying to focus on one client base or marketing to one demographic or avatar, if you try to view everything as an opportunity, then what takes priority? We're all individuals. We're singular resources. Our time, our energy, and our money is definitely finite. So focus it. Try to go deep rather than wide.
Jack of all trades, a master of none, one might say. Getting a
Mhm.
little too spread out thin there. Would you see
Yeah,
that
I'm
very
on this
commonly too?
protocol.